All right. Good morning, everyone, and very much welcome to another Flash Friday. My name is Ginsel from Holland FinTech, and I'll be taking you through the developments in FinTech today. Of course, I won't be doing that by myself. I've got a great guest today. Talin Bezmen from Workiva is joining me today. Good morning, Talin.
Good morning, Don, and thank you for having me this morning.
Yeah, great to have you here. You're based in the UK, right?
I am, yes, in London.
How are things going over there at the moment?
Today is an absolutely gray and rainy day after the sunshine we received yesterday, but just another day in London. Managing the lockdown, waiting for the phased opening to happen so that people can maybe kind of get that human interaction a little bit more. But other than that, just another day, another Friday, and I'm sure everyone's looking forward to the weekend as well.
No, exactly. Well, let's see if we can warm them up a little bit with a bit of insights from the fintech field. And so thank you for joining me. For all our guests, please type your questions in the comments if you have any, and also curious always to get your feedback if you have any ideas on what we can further do on our show. But first of all, what we'll do is actually go through what, of course, Talin and Workiva are actually up to these days. And then we'll try to browse a bit through everything that's going on in the fintech world outside and see if we can give some perspective. So Talin, maybe start a little bit with what you do at Workiva. Can you introduce us a bit?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll start with introducing Workiva as a company. I'm mindful that maybe not everyone knows who we are. Workiva is a US-based and cloud-based platform that simplifies complex work within financial reporting, regulatory reporting, and risk management by creating business processes that are automated, transparent, and collaborative, and a reporting environment that focuses on productivity. As mentioned, we're based out of the United States, founded in 2008. We've been in Europe since 2013. And currently have operations in the UK, Ireland, Netherlands, France, and Germany, and definitely more to come. We're very happy to be in Europe, and it's been a great market for us. We also have operations in Asia Pac as well. Me personally, I am actually coming up on my 10-year anniversary at Workiva this July. So true Workivian, as we call it, have both worked on the US side of the operations and have been in EMEA now for 4 years. Within my role, I lead market development. So what that means is a lot of our go-to-market strategies, our marketing, our partnerships, and our ability to kind of expand into new markets or new use cases and solutions within Workiva. So, what we've been up to the last year has been obviously quite interesting with the pandemic and everyone kind of going into this remote work from home environment. We believe that we've been able to provide our customers some ease and comfort through our cloud-based platform, ability to collaborate, ability to work together, and not disrupt that kind of work environment they have. When you are in this regulatory reporting environment or a financial reporting environment, the deadlines are tight. None of them changed with the pandemic, and lots of pressure coming on to our clients, and now they have to adapt to a new working environment on top of that. So we were able to give them maybe some piece of comfort and something that they're used to, and not a huge disruption to their work environment. So just quickly about Workiva in a nutshell, I would say we fit probably a little bit between kind of fintech and regtech, somewhere where those two merge. So that would probably be where I'd put us as within the industry.
No, exactly. I always see them more as a sort of a flags you can put down to give some direction, but it's always really hard to nail down the exact definitions, especially if you want to be exclusive on, if regtech and fintech can't overlap, you already become.
And the definitions are ever evolving, right, Don? Like the definition, what fintech was maybe 2-3 years ago and what it is today is also a little bit different. So I think it just shows how the market is evolving continuously.
Yeah, no, I fully agree there, and I think that's also it's really funny because language is of course very fluid, right? So I think when we talked about the 90s about mobile phones, we weren't talking about these kind of things. So
Absolutely.
it's always funny to see how also then actually we sometimes mix up the conclusions, like you had at some point that apparently McKinsey said that AT&T shouldn't invest in mobile phones because there was only room for 1 million pieces worldwide, so it's not worth the investment. But of course, then we weren't talking about a smartphone. We were talking basically about a suitcase with a horn on it. So it's a completely different world. But still, because the word remains, and the same goes for fintech. Indeed, I fully agree with you. And so, what kind of parties are you mostly working for with Workiva? What are your typical customers?
Yeah, so we work very closely with publicly traded companies. In the United States, we work with, I'd say, 75% of the Fortune 500. So those large multinational global companies. We started in the United States when we were founded in 2008. Our target was that SEC reporting, the regulatory reporting in the US. That was kind of our starting point and our point into these companies. But ever since then, we've expanded with the different use cases we have, and we work very closely also with financial services companies. Lots of regulation around banking and insurance that we can help those clients with. So that's an area too. We are very much industry agnostic. We're much more focused on the pains that our clients have and that financial reporting process that's also ever evolving, obviously, with technology and the need for further transparency. But from an industry perspective, it's usually not the biggest factor. It's more about the pains and the value that we can bring. And where we do add more value is where there is more pain, where the processes are more complex, and those are usually large multinational global companies who need to manage processes across the world, across different languages, currencies, units, you name it, and time zones as well, to bring everyone together in a singular platform to kind of mitigate the risk that may come with that complex process.
Yep. Can you take us a little bit through, let's say, sort of what kind of data are you then talking about? Because I think I can imagine that you talk about IFRS, financial data. I mean, that's quite kind of a straight through perspective, because you can sort of plug into the bookkeeping. But what else around that? Because I think it doesn't stop there, right?
Absolutely. So first of all, when we talk about data, I do want to kind of clarify what we do and what we don't do. We're not here to replace the big ERPs that a lot of these companies use. On the contrary, we connect to them and we build a more connected environment. So the data that is very raw and huge in those ERPs, we can pull that into our platform where it gets consolidated. Again, on annual, quarterly basis, all that financial data that large companies is quite confidential and quite important in telling their story. But we also go beyond that. We're also, help customers and companies collect non-financial information that is now much more and more in the forefront for businesses, especially investors. It's, when you do want to tell your story as a company, financial data only tells part of it these days. You need to have a holistic view, and that's where that non-financial part comes in as well. And then for large institutions like banks and insurance companies where there's a lot of regulation around, risk and stress testing, and the data and processes that go into that are also areas where we're able to cater to. So, the beauty of our platform is that it is very flexible and configurable based off of the client's needs, and kind of understanding where they're looking to add value. And typically, lots of regulation around how this data needs to be managed and presented. So just providing our clients a peace of mind that the process is helping them get to the right end results.
Exactly. So because that's basically what you do, you basically sort of pull up the whole process, what they need to actually get that reporting in order. And so you tell me that that you basically pull in the data from all kinds of different sources and help aggregate that into the reporting standards that you need. And on the output side, are we moving already in towards sort of real-time digital reporting, or where do we stand at that level?
I'd say that's still evolving. Europe recently moved to for financial reporting with the single electronic format to XBRL reporting with it, which is much more digital than prior to that. It was purely PDF, where PDF is great at telling your story. It's very static, and the way to kind of find the data is very maybe old school in certain ways. Whereas kind of going to these kind of digital options right now. Your data is much more transparent, easier to access, and also easier to compare. When you take the lens of an investor and you need to compare two, companies in this, like let's say two pharma companies, and you want to compare their information, you kind of have to put two PDFs side by side, or put them into Excel or whatever. It's just not the best use of time for an analyst. Whereas with these digital formats that are much easier to compare and access. We're making the lives of the people who need to consume this data easier. So United States has been using XBRL for, I guess, almost 10 years now, or over 10 years now. And Europe has XBRL requirements in certain other areas, which is a digital reporting format, by the way. It's kind of like a barcode. You tag your numbers with a barcode, easier to access what it is and compare also periods with each other. So, and then other things we start seeing a lot among our customers, from an output perspective that you asked on, is having these kind of interactive websites where, you can just sync your information very quickly and access it that way as well. So while I will say that, PDF or Excel or those things, I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. They'll still be around, but I don't think they'll be the
Excel
core.
is not going anywhere. It's kept the financial industry afloat, I think, for ages. But
exactly. But alternatives are still are starting to come to the market to kind of open the eyes of everyone to say, Excel's still there, but this is probably, more efficient. So again, a lot of this is change management, right? We spoke about earlier, definitions of things are changing. The processes need to follow as well. Processes change as well. And with that comes change management and adapting to kind of the new way of doing things. And with that, technology is the way to help these companies.
Yeah. No, I think that's really cool, and I can really imagine that there's indeed, especially since there's so much more pressure on investors to actually be much more aware of what they're investing in. They really have a reporting challenge on their own end to actually get a good sense of the whole value chain. So how do you see that evolving? I mean, do you see also that we're actually getting better at understanding the different layers in the value chain on basically, for example, indeed, if we talk about clothing, through which hands has it gone before it actually ends up with the customer? Is that something you look into as well?
Yeah, I mean, we help so we wouldn't advise our clients around, their business practices, but I would say that the market is going in that direction for sure. We're hearing a lot from investors, Workiva's investors included, to kind of go beyond what's in that financial document, go beyond what's in that balance sheet. What's the story behind that? What are, from an environmental, social and governance perspective, what are companies investing in, and what are they putting in the forefront, and how does it tie into their values? So you can be, high profitable or high growth, but if the story behind what your company is doing is maybe not as accepted or clear and transparent, that may start causing some question marks. And we do see this with some of the largest companies in the world every day announcing their commitment to ESG or environmental needs or social needs, and how they are looking at practices beyond financial practices and telling their company story. And it's very much investor driven. It's not these companies all deciding among themselves. Investors do care, and that data, I would say, we spoke about the evolution of financial information. Non-financial information is 20 years, 30 years behind in the way that data is collected and managed and then reported. So there's a lot of catching up to do in that area right now as well, for those processes to kind of catch up with what's happening in the financial world, to be able to create similar efficiencies, but also at the end result of transparency, and for these companies to be able to tell their story.
Yeah, it's quite. But I can imagine that's quite a tough job for you as well, to keep up with basically the changing requirements there, both from let's say, especially like non-financial data is just something that's, well, sometimes in several cases we actually don't have the right taxonomy to actually judge properly. How should we report on this? How do we quantify this? So I think that's still sort of being debated. We see now, for example,
the EU actually just announced their taxonomy around this that we've been looking at very closely, because at the end of the day, going back to what we spoke about, comparability of information, right? If you have people or companies reporting on non-financial information, but it's not comparable, or it's completely different stories and based off of completely different criteria, it just becomes isolated within these or among these companies. So the taxonomy's ultimate goal is to harmonize these processes and standardize them a little bit more, because when I do look at that non-financial environment, there's so many frameworks and guidelines and standards, and everyone can pick and choose whatever they want. Even as part of the non-financial directive in Europe, there is no direction of what what guidelines they should be using. It's just an overarching, requirement. So I think the EU taxonomy will give companies, as well as advisory firms like the Big Four, who are there to help these companies with their services, some direction and some clarity on maybe some best practices and just creating a more standardized process that can be compared.
Yeah, I can imagine. Are you engaging also, for example, with policymakers on these kind of subjects to figure out, to basically look at the practical side of the reporting, for example?
We do here and there, whenever there are taxonomies, we will provide feedback and input, just because we have been in this industry for 10 years and we have fantastic thought leaders at Workiva who breathe and live all of this stuff. So. Even with the ESEF taxonomy, as that was that's more on the financial side, obviously, but as that was being developed in Europe too, we provided some feedback and were part of some of the field testing as well. So in areas where we do feel experienced and that we do have value to add, we will absolutely do that. And in the US now, there's some additional kind of non-financial taxonomies being developed with SASB. And we've been participating there and supporting them as well.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I think your role there is also, if you want to talk about how do we in the end create real automated reporting and much more, let's say, capabilities of processing the data, because at some point it's not anymore about having the data, it's actually about being able to process it. And I think that your capabilities come in really handy there also for policymakers, because they tend to also sometimes come with requirements that overcomplicate things, going beyond their own purpose, basically.
And the policymakers, they put out the regulation, they put out the requirements and maybe the template, but it's up to the technology companies to adapt those and make them available to these, to the end users or the companies who are required to publish and report on these. So that technology pillar is, I think, from a regulation and policy perspective, is now, it just has to become part of the more integrated part of the process, because we do provide the forum for the companies to actually comply. So it all needs to be connected.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great, because I think it's a really important field, I think, at the moment, because people just they need to know much more about everything that's going on in their whole value chain and how big their impact is. How do you see that evolving from here? Because I think there's so much more focus now on ESG or SDG related impacts. Where do you see it going from here? Do you expect more regions to come up with similar taxonomies, or who's leading the pack, basically?
Well, the beauty of Europe, right? So the European Union or European Commission will put out some regulation and law, and then each country has the ability to add to it or change it or tweak it. So then you can have, 26, 27 version of it. And then the EEA or Switzerland may want to participate as well. And then before you know it, your point of standardization just went mute, and you're back to 27 versions of the same thing. So it's just the beauty of Europe. But I do think, a lot of we have customers across Europe, and I really do trust the feedback we hear from the field, from companies, as well as partners that we have are among the Big Four and beyond. And everyone is saying this is the direction. ESG is becoming part of what we need to do. Investors are asking within companies, C-level are now exposed to it and are pressuring their teams to be, and we're seeing roles like chief sustainability officer, things like that didn't exist before. So it's definitely coming. And if I were one of these public companies in Europe, I'd want to prepare now. There's already a non-financial directive in Europe around some environmental data and ESG data you need to publish in your annual report. The UK, well, not part of the EU anymore, but still, just mandated TCFD.
We can count the UK as Europe. Yeah.
Okay. Never sure how to go with that one, but they did just kind of implement TCFD, which is a guideline for non-financial reporting, as a mandate in the annual report for the UK listed and UK headquartered companies. Spain's looking to add a controls environment around non-financial reporting. So the trends are just coming our way. Like every time read the news in the morning, it's a new country with a new trend or a new requirement or a new direction they want to take. So I think it's inevitable, and we definitely need to get ahead of it and start kind of building the processes around this to ensure that when the mandates are in place and they are more expanded than they are today, that the companies have the infrastructure in place, rather than trying to play catch up after the fact and then putting something in front of investors that are subpar.
Yeah, no, exactly. I can definitely imagine that. And so do you also see that the social part is becoming more of an issue there? Because I think, let's say, for example, the wealth gap is becoming increasingly part of the opinion leaders. Everyone's talking about this and also there, actually, we saw that the pandemic only widened the gap rather than narrowed it. Do you see that that's also these kind of social factors are becoming increasingly also part of reporting?
100%. I mean, if you even go on LinkedIn or social media, first of all, you see, companies continuously posting about what they're doing for their communities, their employees, people in need, diversity programs, anything you can think about. It's actually becoming much more and more in the forefront. And that goes back to also, the era we live in, the era of technology and everything being information and content being so easily accessible. People are now telling these stories not only in annual reports or sustainability reports, but on social media and in real time, because it's really important for their brands that they're not only focused on the money that they're making for their investors, but what they're doing for their stakeholders and communities and the people around them and the people who contribute to that company's growth directly or indirectly. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. In the ESG. Everyone's been so focused on the E in the past because it's just maybe easier to quantify compared to the S and the G. It's all catching up. It needs to come together and tell a holistic story. And I think that's what companies are really, really striving towards. And I think you can't really put a mandate around, maybe you can, I guess, but maybe not today, around some of these things. But it doesn't really matter. Investors care, stakeholders care. The board cares of a lot of these companies. So it's coming, and I think we're going to see more and more of it.
Yeah, quite interesting. I think how that's evolving, and I think it's putting, let's say, also sometimes really making things transparent and measurable, really sort of puts it into people's faces at such a level that they will actually have to start making decisions on it and influence it, right? So I think that's really why the reporting and making it transparent is so important. So if you look at, let's say, one of the fields that's also really on the rise is, for example, alternative data, right? So we besides, of course, within companies, there's, of course, a bunch of data that's available, across the world, as we see from satellites, IoT devices, smartphones, internet connections, anywhere. Do you see that there are more of these data sources being explored as well for reporting on the environment of economic activity?
So me personally, I will be honest, not an area that I'm strongly connected to, but kind of what my gut says is absolutely. It's data is the future, and the accessibility to it is, and we just have so many diverse sources of data that make up who we are and what we do, and what a company is about. And again, kind of going back to what I said earlier is, that financial data is not enough to tell a company's story anymore, or any story anymore. I think this ties really nicely into that. We spoke about financial, we spoke about non-financial, but it actually goes beyond that as well. Alternative data is a component, and I will say some of these are maybe still catching up in importance or impact, but they're there and they can't be ignored. So absolutely. I think these are things that definitely will start coming up in the forefront more and more, as investors care, as companies care, and as technology companies are able to provide more efficient ways to collect and analyze this information.
No, I agree. I think to a large extent it has a lot to do with the usability of the information and the tools that are being provided, indeed. And I think from that perspective, alternative data is still early on. But indeed, I think once we get better at drawing conclusions from satellite images and all kinds of measurement devices, once that gets turned into solid conclusions, it will probably indeed make part of the whole communication flow. For example, let's say, for example, if we looked at the news this week, we saw that Robinhood is filing for an IPO. We also got PensionBee, for example, in the UK filing for an IPO. What would you recommend these kind of companies to do? Because they might actually come from, let's say, a relatively private environment with just, they know their investors very well. And so their reporting might also be relatively concise. And they basically have to move into your space where they just have to start opening up everything. How do they get that started?
I mean, I will say the IPO market is very hot right now. I think everyone is aware of that reading the news, and we are at Workiva because we cater to those companies. Yep. So, I'll add a bit of a personal experience here. I started at Workiva. At the time, it was actually called Web Filings when we were a public company. When we were a private company. So when I started, we were a private company. And then I was part of the journey in 2014 when we went public. And that transition it's a big transition because now everything you do is much more transparent and open, and you have to think more about some of the maybe activities you're taking, investments you're making, actions you're taking, direction, even strategic direction you're taking. You have now a very clear responsibility towards your investors. So that combined with the digital age we're in, where data is very much easier to access, and mistakes are much easier to identify. Having a good transparent process is extremely important. These companies that are IPOing now, they're going to have to be very transparent in their business practices, their financials, their information. On almost, well, in the US, on a quarterly basis. Here it's more on a 6-month, half-year basis, but then regular investor relation updates and things like that now you're accountable for, and you need to do it in a timely manner, and you need to make sure that you're telling a good story, and you need to show progress and growth. That's really important. And if you have a mistake, if things are mismatching in your documents and the data you're providing, it's going to get caught really, really quickly. Yep. So you just need to have a process that you can trust, and that is there to support what you're trying to do as now a newly public company. Yep.
No, I think that's quite a challenge. It's quite a big turnover for companies that come from the private area. Well, thanks. I think it's good to share that, and quite some challenges there. But indeed, I think the benefits still are good enough, especially now with this hot IPO environment, with either through SPACs or direct listings. There's just so much going on at the moment.
Yep.
And maybe some other trend, which I think we've seen also over the past time with, for example, cryptocurrencies being really popular, both on a private level, but increasingly also from a company level. I think it's quite a sort of a ticking time bomb that you're also getting on board as a company if you would actually bring on crypto assets on your balance sheet while you have to be so transparent in reporting. We see already that in the financial industry, because of AML requirements, it's quite tough to actually be doing that. But I think in general for companies, or also from a reporting perspective, it brings quite some challenges. Any thoughts on that?
I think maybe that's one of the area where, from reporting, especially technology probably has to catch up a little bit more. I think it's one that we're still easing into a little bit more. I mean, it's been around for a few years now. It's definitely in the news very, very regularly. But, once it starts becoming part of what these larger corporations do, especially public ones, it's going to change a little bit about how we think and digest this information. And I think we still have a lot of learning to do there and a lot of catching up to do. If this is the direction the market is dictating, I am sure technology will catch up. It always does. But, I think we're still kind of trending towards it rather than, I just don't think we're there yet, but I think it's more of trending towards getting there.
Yeah. No, I think so too. It's I'm really curious about how that'll evolve, and of course, it's quite a volatile market in any case. So, but before we're in this big bust again, where everyone's completely ignoring it, like we've seen already a couple of times before. But you never know. And so, what do you see? What do you see as the next steps for Workiva? I mean, let's say you could do more with the data, or you could basically look at different ways of reporting to different, let's say, more automated reporting, more automated decision making, fraud prevention. There's a whole wide field that you could basically move into from where you stand. What do you think? What's next from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Innovation is in our DNA. 30% of our revenue goes straight back into R&D. So we're very much invested in continuously improving our product. I think, we really want to take away the manual as much as possible away from our clients, so they can focus on automation and then analyzing and reviewing the data and understanding how that impacts their business. That's where we're focused on. So, as I mentioned, we're now, expanding more into this non-financial data and that non-financial processes. So you'll see much more of us there, much more talking about ESG and the connection and the integration between that financial and non-financial information. And the regulatory trends, I will say, regulation is constantly changing. It's and companies have more and more burdens coming their way. And I think when you do have a platform like Workiva, you're almost proving yourself to what's coming. So we're not like, solving a point problem today. We're hoping to solve what's coming in the future as well. And we're always committed to that. So, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in the US or Asia Pac, as new mandates and requirements do come, we will continue to keep up, especially, when it comes to XBRL. That is a technology we really believe in. It's part of our DNA. And we definitely believe in the value it brings to the field. So we will continuously invest in that, and we know that the regulators are continuously asking more for it as well. So I think it's a fantastic synergy for us. So yeah, from our perspective, just continue to keep up with the trends that are going and provide our customers a more transparent and less risk prone environment where they can just trust in their processes.
Yeah, well, great. Thanks for sharing, Talin. I think we've run out of time already. Time flies. But no, it's been really fun to talk to you. I think it's been great to understand a bit on your perspective. And I think, let's say, given the trend of increased transparency in the investment value chain and company reporting, it was really great to hear your perspective on this today.
It was a pleasure to be here, Don. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks. I'm looking forward to talk to you again soon. And for everyone who's listening in, thank you very much for joining us today. It was great that you could join us. We hope you've learned a bit and got enthusiastic about what Workiva is doing and over everything that's going on in the fintech space. Should you have any comments or questions, please reach out. And I'm looking forward to talk to you again next week. For now, enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.